Hi, creative friends. This is Sreya, and thank you so much for being here. So today I want to showcase the art of Egon Schiele, a brilliant of an artist as ever there was. I first came across his work in an art history class in university, and I was instantly smitten. So he's Austrian, and he was born in the early 1900s, and unfortunately, he passed away at a very young age. He was 28 years old when he died of the Spanish flu. Now, he was very prolific considering how short of an art time span he had. And he, along with Gustav Klimt, were targeted by the Nazis for what was labeled as degenerate art. And their works were removed from museums and galleries. And him and Gustav Klimt were friends, with Klimt even mentoring Schiele. So I'm going to just flip through this amazing book of him and his art. And this is a very early portrait that he did of himself. It's a self-portrait. And as you can see, he was classically trained. He was 17 years old at the time, and he studied at the Vienna Academy of Art. And as you can see, this is a portrait, it's a oil and pencil painting, if you will, depicting water and boats, and it's very well rendered. Now over here is a oil on card painting, and as you can see, is classically trained. This is a very beautiful rendering of an interior, and this is a portrait. And his landscapes are beautiful, but unremarkable. Like, there's no way I would look at this and say, oh, it's a Schiele. But this is his earlier works, and it shows nothing about the way his art would become later on. Now, as you can see over here, this is a watercolor of a beautiful rendition of a ball. And I'm going to bring it up closer here. So as you can see, he had mastered the technical aspects of painting with light, and really, really beautiful, but again, unremarkable. Now over here, you can see the heavy influence of Klimt. You can see it in the clothing. You can see it in the very structure of the elongated form, the composition, and you can see it with, the side profile. This is very heavily influenced by Gustav Klimt. But I'm going to bring this up closer. These hands are Schiele. This is a signature of Schiele. And I absolutely love the way he renders hands. Now this, of course, again, is another heavily influenced piece by Schiele, but it's modeled after Klimt. And once again, this is Schiele, and this is the original Klimt, and there's very strong influences. Now, if I didn't know, and if I just had to look at this, I would think that this was done by Gustav Klimt, but it's actually a Schiele. So as you can see, a lot of his early works were highly influenced by Klimt. Now, this is a typical Schiele portrait, like what he is known for. And what do I love about his work? So first and foremost, in my interpretation of his paintings, his sketches, all of his art, I love the way he depicts the human form. I love the rawness of it, the ugliness of it, and his work has it has intense psychological depth, and they portray something other than the physical. So to me, that is really, really important. His hands tell stories upon stories, all of their own. And his art was heavily influenced by his time, and it reflects the societal upheaval and existential crisis that was going on at the time. There were wars, there was famine, there was illness, and a lot of his nudes feature distorted limbs, provocative and unapologetic poses. Now, there are some people who say that he was a feminist, but he absolutely was not. He was a man of his time. His portrayal of women, they are objectifying, and he frequently depicted them in very vulnerable, submissive, and sexually charged positions, reflecting a patriarchal view of women's bodies. His art also leaned heavily on voyeurism, and he rarely portrayed women as complex individuals. They were often symbols of desire or suffering. And furthermore, his personal relationships of women are marked by exploitation and mistreatment. So when he was in his prime, if you will, he was arrested for having sex with a minor. He abducted and molested a 13-year-old girl. He also had sexual desires for his younger sister. That's well documented. And for me, this is often the most difficult part of knowing the back end of all the stories of artists. Like, how do I reconcile the fact that I love his art, but also acknowledge the monstrosities that he committed? And a lot of times, artists, especially males, have very, very convoluted stories. Like Picasso was a known and very proud misogynist. That's well documented as well. Now, one of the things I love about Schiele is that his figures, with all of the elongated limbs, they create tension and anxiety, and they often seem to escape the confines of the canvas. Like, they seem to just like pop right out of the canvas onto into our space, the viewer. Now, he was fascinated with death, and when his wife died, his works became more and more focused on isolation, despair, and the fragility of life. And as you can expect, you know, early 19th century Vienna was very conservative, and his works were absolutely not accepted. Now, these are two women, and so there's a whole other level of non-acceptance that, you know, a very conservative society like at that time was going to reject and have issue with. Now, this over here is the very famous painting by Van Gogh, The Artist's Bedroom at Arles, and Schiele did a rendition of it as well. Now, this one is by Kandinsky, and this one here is Schiele. You can see his brush strokes. They are very, very prominent, and they are a signature of Egon Schiele. Now, these are cityscapes. Now, one of the great things about Schiele is that he portrayed cityscapes and landscapes as very moody, melancholy, almost human. So his cityscapes and landscapes, they reflect the human condition rather than any kind of architectural underpinnings. And they have like a whole personality of their own. As you can see, this over here, it's the windows and frames, walls and tiles, and they have character. They tell you a little bit about the people living inside of these dwellings. It's not just a, you know, a very well rendered architectural drawing. Now, I'm just gonna come back to this. As you can see, there's a man, there is a, you know, there's a sexual organ right here, and there's a woman. I mean, this is absolutely not acceptable for the time. So the works of, like I said, Klimt as well as Schiele were targeted as degenerate art by the Nazis, and Klimt actually wrote a very rebuking letter to the Nazis, which was very courageous of him, because at that time, I mean, he could have been murdered, he could have been jailed, there's a ton of things that could have happened to him. Unfortunately, by that time, Schiele had already passed, but they were both targeted. Now, obviously, a lot of his paintings are very, very bony and skinny, but, you know, there was famine at the time, there was war, so these were normal figures that it was an accurate depiction of the time. And he left in all of the you know, the flaws of the human body. He wanted to portray beauty and ugliness all at once. And a lot of his portraits are, they're controversial and sexual in nature. Their gaze are often intense and unsettling. And he showed all the flaws of the human body and pushed societal conventions of what beauty was. Like over here, you can see there's underarm hair. He leaves like pubic hair on and hair on the, again, you know, pubic hair. Just gonna bring this up closer. Obviously very, very unacceptable for the time. And he leaves like hair on the legs. And, you know, this is not the flawless skin, the demure gaze, the you know, the Victorian era clothing that was depicted in the paintings prior to this. This is a strong departure. And of course, this pose over here, absolutely unacceptable. Now, I was very fortunate enough to visit the Leopold Museum in Vienna, which has the largest collection of Schiele's art. There are 43 paintings and over 200 watercolors, drawings, and prints, and I spent the entire day there. What a wonder to behold. His brush strokes are genius. They are just magic. I just stood in front of each piece of art and I just took it all in. I was so honored. It was such a privilege to see the originals. It's one of my fondest, most valuable memories. So if you compare a lot of these portraits with the traditional Victorian era, and I say Victorian era, but it's all over Europe. It's in Italy, it's in Spain, it's all over, you know, the all the clothing and the woman not looking directly at the viewer, but, you know, her gaze is averted. All of those things, Schiele just throws them by the wayside. Now, there is a painting here that I'm going to talk about for a minute. It is called, let me see here. Well, first, let me just talk about this painting here. This one is called Blind Mother. And again, usually the mother and child was portrayed as very demure, very respectable, etc., etc. But as you can see, he is completely different in his portrayal of the mother. The mother is squatting, her legs are wide open. There are two heads of the child, but only one figure of the child. And it's a very uncomfortable pose. And, you know, even this depiction of mother and child, the child is like, you know, the woman is showing her back. She's naked from the, you know, from the breast down. It's just a very unusual portrait of a child and mother. And, you know, even this one over here, the mother looks very emaciated. She looks, you know, poverty stricken. They look as if they're starving. And this was not the traditional portrait of the mother and child. Now, this is a family portrait, and they're all squatting and naked. So another very uncomfortable portrayal of the family. And the painting I want to talk about is called Cardinal and Nun. So beautiful renditions of the hands. Just gorgeous. I love the way he renders the hands. They tell stories upon stories of their own. See, look at his hands. Look at his portrayal. They just have so much character. They are so beautiful. I absolutely love the way he paints them and draws them. Now this is a self-portrait of him masturbating, so that is, you know, parts of his body that are taking center stage. So as you can see, this was very challenging to society at the time. Oh, this is the one over here. So it's called Cardinal and Nun Caress, and they show a cardinal and a nun in a very vulgar pose. Now this, obviously, as you can imagine, caused the church to actively come out against this painting, and there was a huge outcry, not only from the church, but even from the state. And of course, that is a Klimt. This is another self-portrait of himself, as you can see, the elongated limbs. And to me, one of the things I love the most about his art is it's so uncompromising and unflinching, and it's deeply, deeply human. And his legacy is to not only depict reality, but to challenge it, to provoke it, and to reveal the raw, often uncomfortable truths about our existence. And these are portraits of landscapes and flowers. And he, again, showed a very psychological portrait of whatever he was painting or drawing. Because as you can see, these are wilted sunflowers and they're fading. The main head of the flower is dying. You know, that's basically everything in decay. But, you know, there's so much beauty in all of that. Now, this is a great way to compare three very different artists, and not comparison for the sake of judgment, but just comparison to see how they each rendered their objects very differently. So this is Schiele, this is Klimt, and this is Van Gogh. Now, with Van Gogh, of course, he had you know, mental illness. He was dealing with a lot of extenuating circumstances like poverty, etc. But when he portrayed the sunflowers, he captured the power of the sun and the sunflowers. I mean, they are in all their splendor. They are joyful. They are evocative. They're just stunning in their beauty. Now, Klimt, he portrays the sunflower as almost a human figure, as a queen, if you will. And he depicts the sunflower in full glorious majesty. It's almost as if she is sitting on her throne, and the sunflower itself is a crown on top of her head. Now, with Schiele, he is depicting the sunflower, excuse me, as fading and rotting and full of decay. And, you know, it's still gorgeous. The blooms still have all of their finery. They are decaying. It's like, you know, powerful and evocative, and it's almost a psychological portrait, if you will. And you know, I love all three of these paintings. I don't know. I think, okay, I really love Van Gogh's Sunflowers. It's iconic. But, you know, I love the idea of this being a queen with a crown on top of her head. But I also love the beauty of all the decay and, you know, the life, death, life cycle. So, you know, like I said, it's comparison just to see how they approach their subjects differently, but not from a place of judgment. And again, you know, you see Schiele, you know, just rendering the sunflower, but in a state of decay. And this I absolutely love. It's depicting, you know, trees in the fall. And again, the trees seem dead, but they are still filled with life. Again, you know, very evocative paintings and cityscapes. And over here, you can tell a lot by, you know, what he has chosen to portray. Like there's a whole bunch of clothing that's hanging out, so that tells you a little bit about the people living inside of them. There are no people to be seen, but the buildings are filled with life. But, you know, it's it still has a deeply psychological component to it. And he was always very interested in portraying landscapes and cityscapes as reflective of the human condition rather than architectural drawings. They're moody, they're melancholy, they're full of stories and life. So I do know that Egon Schiele isn't for everyone. You either love him or hate him. Generally, that seems to be the theme. And for me, it was an instant and insatiable love for his work. It just simply speaks to me. And these are all aspects of our own visual language as well. What do we love and why, as well as what do we hate and why? And these can all give us so many clues about building up our own strong visual language. So if you've watched all the way to the end, thank you so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.